Hey everyone, it's time to eat again. Today we are making the famous Taiwanese style white sandwich bread. This bread is super soft, incredibly airy, and just a little sweet. We're going to show you how to do this in 3 different ways. With a bread maker, in a regular loaf pan, and inside of a pullman loaf pan for that classic square look. This bread making method starts with a Tang, roughly translated as soup seed, or more accurately as a water roux. First, measure out the ingredients for the Tang and combine them in a saucepan. Also measure out the additional 120 milliliters of cold milk. On medium-high heat, cook the flour and milk mixture until a dough forms. Then remove from heat and immediately add the whole milk to rapidly decrease the temperature of the mixture. Let the dough rest and drop in temperature while we focus on the dry ingredients. Combine the bread flour, white sugar, non-fat dry milk powder, yeast, and salt. The sugar is where you have some room to customize your bread. You can add up to 60 grams of sugar to bring out more sweetness, or go all the way down to 30 grams for a yeastier taste. Now that the Tang has had some time to cool down, we can whisk 1 large egg into it to further cool it down. The dough should now be very close to room temperature, or just slightly warm to the touch. We want the mixture to be less than 100 degrees Fahrenheit to avoid killing the yeast. Now pour the wet ingredients into the dry and use the dough hook to gently mix everything together until a shaggy mix has formed. Start the stand mixer on speed 2 until the dough comes together. Then bump the speed up to 4 and knead for 7 minutes. After the 7 minutes is over, we are going to continue to run the machine on the same speed while adding 1 tablespoon of softened butter at a time, letting each part fully incorporate before adding the next chunk. Continue until 3 tablespoons of butter have been fully incorporated. Butter adds more richness to this already addicting bread. You may reduce the amount of butter by a tablespoon if you don't want to get too fat, but we don't care about that right now. Now that the kneading is complete, we are going to form this dough into a smooth ball before allowing it to rise. The dough is soft and moist, but does not readily stick to anything. Give your hands and work surface a light coating of oil. Then start by tucking the dough into itself on its underside to form a smooth top. Continue to do this for 10 to 15 seconds. This motion begins to orient the strands of gluten formed by the kneading process. Now place the dough ball on your working surface and cup your hands around the ball, and in a circular motion squeeze the base of the dough ball together and against the surface. Doing this motion helps to seal the bottom, but don't worry about how it looks on the bottom. Now that the dough is complete, place it into an oiled bowl and allow it to rise for 45 to 60 minutes or until doubled in size. While the dough rises, you have plenty of time to subscribe to the channel, smash that like button, share this with your friends, and to grease your baking tray with butter. If your non-stick loaf pan has a small chip in it, like mine, either replace it or use some parchment paper to cover it up so that the non-stick coating does not continue to peel off into your food. When greasing a Pullman loaf pan, we are going to make sure that every surface is well coated, including the lid. If you're using a bread machine, feel free to skip this step. When the dough has doubled in size, punch it down and turn it out onto your working surface. Here's where the recipe deviates depending on your baking method. For a regular loaf pan, divide the dough up into 4 equal pieces and use the same technique of tucking and rolling on the work surface as before the rise to form each into a round ball. Then take each ball and roll it out into a rough rectangle approximately a 1/4 inch thick, pushing out any air bubbles. Then fold it like a trifold letter. Repeat with all 4 pieces. Then take each trifold and roll it in the other direction before rolling it into logs and placing them seam side down in the loaf pan. The action of making a trifold, then rolling the dough in the other direction before forming a log is what sets the gluten to form strands in the final product, which is what distinguishes how Asian sandwich bread tears and its mouthfeel versus regular white sandwich bread. For the bread machine, we are going to follow the exact same steps as the regular loaf pan, but divide the dough into 2 pieces instead of 4. Form 2 smooth dough balls using the tucking method. Roll them into rectangles approximately a 1/4 inch thick, then fold them like a trifold letter, and finally roll flat in the other direction before forming logs as before. Place these 2 logs seam side down inside your bread machine. For the Pullman loaf pan, what you do depends on the size of your pan. For a full-size Pullman loaf pan, you may even need to double the initial dough recipe. For my 179 cubic inch loaf pan, I'm going to use 480 grams of dough. That is equivalent to 2.68 grams of dough per cubic inch. Do the math for your Pullman loaf pan. My loaf pan is 8 inches long, so I'm going to divide my 480 grams of dough into 3 equal pieces, and again form each into a smooth round ball, and again repeating the steps to form each into logs. Set these logs inside of the baking tin, steam side down. In all 3 methods, set aside and allow the bread to rise for 45 minutes or until it has doubled in size. Just before we bake the regular loaf and the bread machine loaf, we're going to brush the tops with a mixture of 1 egg yolk and a teaspoon of milk. The yolk will give the surface a beautiful shiny golden brown color, and the milk is to loosen the mixture just enough so that it is easy to brush onto the surface. The milk proteins and sugar also aid in the browning process. The standard and Pullman loaf will bake at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 25 minutes. For the bread machine, we will use the bake function for 30 to 35 minutes. You will need to adjust this for your machine by looking at the surface browning to see if you are happy with the results. When baking with the bread machine, make sure you use a setting that does not knead the dough. If you knead the dough, it will wind up with the same texture as any regular sandwich bread. When the bread is done baking, wait 5 minutes before turning the loaf out onto a cooling rack. Then wait an additional 20 minutes before slicing the bread. If you don't wait before slicing the bread, you will smash the loaf because it is just so soft. And now we have the fluffiest, pillow-soft, mouth-watering Taiwanese-style white bread. Totally worth the wait and absolutely something to be proud of making. If you liked that video and you want to see how to expand on this basic recipe, make sure you subscribe and hit the bell icon to get notified of our next video as we explore further into the irresistible world of an Asian bakery. And we will see you next time when it's time to eat again.